Hey everyone. My name is Charlie Arrowwood. Some of you may have been at my previous workshop, the 101. If you were there, welcome back. If this is your first workshop with me of the day, welcome. I will start by just letting everyone know that there is about a 30-second delay. So even though you can ask questions from the workshop page, the session page, I may not see them. There may be a bit of a lag, so I will do my best to answer them as they come in. Otherwise, I will have a ton of information in this, so I will get to anything that I don't answer at the end if folks still have questions. So just as a hello, I am Charlie. I'm the Community Mobilization Coordinator at Pride for Youth. And in addition to that role, I also am an attorney and I have my own practice doing primarily transition related legal services. So things like name and gender marker changes, health insurance appeals, employment discrimination, that kind of thing. And so this is kind of my best practices and everything that I've learned through that, imparting that onto you, whether you are a service provider or a consumer of, of trans legal services. So I'm going to, just in case folks weren't in the 101 and might need some vocabulary and stuff, we'll go over that very briefly at the beginning, and then we'll get into the name change thing. What I will be explaining to you today is how to do this on your own without an attorney. If things get more complicated and you need an attorney, I will provide you with resources for free legal services. I do this kind of stuff through Pride for Youth, free of charge. So always feel free to reach out to Pride for Youth and they can connect you with me. I can help folks kind of put everything together and give you instructions for filing, all of that. So then we'll get into the name changes, the gender marker changes and document changes, some advocacy that we're working on, and some other resources. Then I'll be able to answer some questions. So just as an initial matter, I just want to make sure that folks know the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Gender identity is kind of your sense of self and how you want others to perceive you. They are independent of each other. Anyone of any gender identity can have any sexual orientation, vice versa. Cisgender just means not trans. So someone who was assigned something at birth and they agree with that assessment and they just go on about their lives. Transgender person is someone who feels something other than what they were assigned at birth. Transgender man is a man who was assigned female at birth. A transgender woman is a woman who was assigned male at birth. You'll notice the space in between there, and that's because trans is an adjective that describes the man or woman or person. A non-binary person is someone who doesn't feel like what they were assigned at birth, but they don't feel squarely male or female. It could be someone who feels kind of in the middle. It could be someone who just feels like something completely different. So those are the words that you might hear me use today to talk about the folks that I work on this with. Transition can look like something different for every trans person. Some trans people have every available intervention. Other people do not. And there's social transition, medical transition, and legal transition. Generally, this name change and document change thing is related to legal transition, but it can also kind of interplay with everything else. So best practices, use someone's chosen name, even if it's not their legal name. So if you are a service provider assisting someone with this kind of thing or with any other services, you want to use the name that they go by. You want to use the pronoun that they go by. Totally fine to ask what pronoun do you use or what is your pronoun. You want to use, if someone uses singular they, use it when, like you would when it's not gender related. So the doctor left their phone on the table. Did you order pizza for them? If you make a mistake, just correct yourself and move on. You don't even have to make it like a whole soliloquy. I'm sorry. I will try better next time. All that. Just sorry. Sorry, they need to come over, or whatever it is. Bathrooms, you want to give people all the options available so that you can direct them. They can choose where they want to go. Intake and administrative forms, you want to make sure that they are kind of inclusive and open-ended and give people the ability to actually put down the information that they need to put down. So have a spot for someone's legal name and chosen name. Have something other than just male and female available. Don't unnecessarily gender questions. So like if you're doing medical intakes, don't say, if you are a woman, when was your last period? Or if you are a woman, is there a chance you're pregnant? Just when was your last period? Is there a chance you're pregnant? There's no need to gender stuff unnecessarily, because then that confuses, or it doesn't confuse people, but it makes it more difficult if someone is trans and they're not sure what exactly you are looking for. So ungendering it kind of makes it just simpler for everyone. And it will either be relevant to the person or it won't. Security, be aware that if you have a security desk or anything, people's IDs might not match. You want to maybe go escort them from security, or let the security person know so that they don't have to have a conversation about it. And when in doubt, refer to the person as they refer to themselves. So the process of changing your name and changing your documents is a little bit different inside New York City and outside New York City. I'm assuming most folks here are on Long Island, but just in case we've got some city folks, I will provide that information as well, just so everyone has it. But ultimately, the process is really the same. You're going to go through the name change process in the courts. And while that's happening, you're going to get a doctor's letter to change the gender marker on your documents. And then once you have the signed and certified court order and the doctor's letter, you're going to change the documents. So all of, driver's license, birth certificate, all that stuff. The standards are a little bit different for every document. So just make sure that you have satisfied the standard for the specific document you need to change. I have instructions on my website that are very comprehensive, that hyperlink to all the forms you'll need. So I will share that link with you at the end. And for the doctor's letter is required for all federal documents like passports and Social Security, and some state documents. As of very recently, New York State birth certificates and New York City birth certificates are done by self-attestation. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Basically, you don't need a doctor's letter for that. But things like a driver's license, you do need a doctor's letter for still. I would say get 2 to 3 ink signed copies so that you're able to send it away for a passport or anything that you need to actually send away the original for, so that you don't run out when you need to change stuff in person. The document changes can be done in any order. So even if you have a birth certificate that you have not changed, you can still use that to get a correct driver's license, for example. You would just bring the doctor's letter and the court order, and that would take care of both the name and the gender marker. And so even if the birth certificate has the wrong name or the wrong gender marker on it, they'll be able to give you the correct document. Name change requirements are set out in state statute. So it's a state law. Most things that they ask for in the statute, we'll go over all the requirements shortly, but even if you have to answer yes to any of those questions, it should not impact your ability to get a name change in New York. Some other states, it does impact, there are some states, if you have certain criminal convictions, you're actually not able to access a name change. But in New York, that's generally not the case. You may just need to provide additional information to the court. So like any sort of documentation you have relating to the issue. There are also, in addition to the statute, additional standards in case law. So courts are not supposed to require medical evidence from you just because you're asking for a name change and you're trans. So if they do that, let me know, because they're not supposed to. Um, Courts generally have little discretion to deny a name change. So the only reason that a judge is supposed to deny a name change is if there's evidence that it's for fraudulent reasons. And technically, the statute requires you to publish in the newspaper, but you are supposed to be allowed to ask for a publication waiver, and that decision by the judge is supposed to be based on a totality of the circumstances. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a little while. All of that being said, some judges do abuse their discretion. So this little excerpt is from a judge who is no longer on the bench for a variety of reasons, one of which is that she kept denying trans name changes, and the higher court got very frustrated with her and told her she needed to stop. This is basically what it looks like when a judge tells you, and they all use the same paragraph, they all use the same language. When a judge tells you that where you've put in the reason for your name change, if you say you're trans and you want your ID documents to match your identity and appearance, this is what it looks like when a judge says, that's not enough, I want medical evidence. So this is, when I said, don't let them ask for medical evidence, this is what it looks like. Bald conclusory statements without any factual support are insufficient to establish entitlement to relief. So she's saying, you just saying you're trans is not enough. I need a doctor's letter or something else that's proof, quote unquote, that you are actually trans and have a reason to change your name. In New York State, New York is a common law name change state. So you are allowed to use whatever name you want to go by, as long as it's not for fraudulent purposes. And the reason you need a court order is really just if you want to change official stuff. So if you're with your friends or in your family or even in school, go by whatever name you want to go by. You don't need that court order unless you're changing an official document like a diploma, or like school gets a little bit hairy because that is technically, a diploma is a legal document and your, state school records are legal documents. But in their outward facing stuff, they should be letting you use whatever name you want to go by. I've also dealt with a minor with two consenting parents, and they submitted everything on their own, pro se, which means without an attorney. And the judge said, decline to sign, and they just mailed it back to them. So it wasn't even a denial that they could appeal from. So they retained an attorney, and we submitted a motion asking the judge to reconsider, explaining that there was no reason for them to decline to sign this name change order. And ultimately it was signed. But stuff like that does pop up, even if you have a straightforward case. There are some judges who are just difficult, or they don't take you seriously if you don't go with an attorney. So they sometimes will throw their weight around, and all it takes is someone on fancy letterhead writing a letter saying that's not appropriate, and they cave immediately. The bottom line is that your name change should not be denied, and if it is, that is not the end of the road. That judge who kept getting overturned, we dealt with like maybe 4 or 5 name changes from her, all of which she denied for no reason. And we had to go into Brooklyn to the appellate court with the denial. They chased 4 judges around to sign an order saying, no, you're wrong, you need to sign this. And so same day, we went to Brooklyn, we came back to Nassau, brought it to her chambers, her courtroom, and she had to sign it. So it was really just a waste of time for everyone, and she kept getting in trouble. It is a pain, but it's doable pretty quickly. It's called a 5704 motion, and you might want to get an attorney involved if this happens, but it is something that's doable. As providers, you can help guide people through the process, even if you are not actually filing for them. So if you are a social worker or some sort of case management person, you can actually help them fill everything out, help them access a notary, give them instructions on where to file, which I can provide people with. But the New York State Court website has a do-it-yourself program. There are separate forms for adults and minors. So if you're over 18, you'd fill out one form. If you're under 18, a parent or some other adult over 18 fills out the form on your behalf. There are separate forms for inside New York City and outside New York City because you file in different kinds of courts. The do-it-yourself program is not for more complicated cases. So if there's a non-consenting parent, you would want to get an attorney involved. If there's a complicated immigration situation, you would want to get an attorney involved. The DIY program does not allow you to ask for a publication waiver request. So the statute, like I said, requires that you publish. This DIY program doesn't give you a way to ask the court to have that waived. If you are interested in using the DIY program and would like to ask for a publication waiver, I can give you that language. You just paste it in there and they should consider it. New York City does allow you to ask for a fee waiver. It has its own forms. New York State's DIY program does not, but I also have those templates if you would like to do that. Actual costs in New York City are about $100, including publication. So if you're required to publish, and outside New York City, across New York State, costs are about $300 if you're required to publish, a little bit less if you're not. You need to use a Windows computer, so no Mac or Apple. Those are the same thing. That was a very old sounding thing for me to say. No Apple computers. And if you don't have access to a Windows computer, you can generally complete everything at your court's law library. So they have little computer terminals set up, and you can complete everything there. This is the link to all the name change forms. So I don't want to mess up my screen share by going to the link, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You know what? No, I'm not gonna do it. It separates it by adult, minor, New York City, New York State. So just make sure that you're filling out the correct form that applies to you. So when you're actually preparing the name change petition, the DIY program is literally a little person on the road to the courthouse with a courthouse on the top of the screen. And as you fill in more information, you walk closer and closer to the courthouse. For whatever reason, it totally unnecessarily requires you to pick male or female. So that's something to be aware of. I have totally gender neutral templates if you would prefer to use those that just say petitioner instead of, Miss or Mr. But if you have aliases or multiple names, if you have any misspellings on any of your IDs, you want to put that in there as an AKA, also known as, so that in this example, it just says in the matter of the application of Amy Lynn Smith. But say, for example, you had a driver's license that said Amy L. Smith or Amy Smith. You would want to do AKA Amy L. Smith, AKA Amy Smith, so that when you go to change that document, the person who's in charge of, like the clerk or whatever, sorry about my dog, the clerk is can tell that you're the person who would like their name changed. Like it kind of binds all the identities together. You want to specify first, middle, and last where there's any doubt. So if someone has two last names or anything like that, you want to make it clear so that you're changing the correct names. If there are accents, be aware that on most documents, if you have an accent in your name, you are probably aware of this already, but if you're adding one, just be aware that on most documents, it's all capitalized, so they actually don't include accents usually. But if you want that to be your legal name, then include the accents. Make sure that it's correct in the petition and the order. So the DIY program is going to spit out a completed petition, which is you asking for the name change, and an order for the judge to sign. Make sure that everything is accurate all throughout. In New York City, it just gives you the petition and the court prepares the order. So when the court gives you back that signed order, before you walk out, make sure it says the right thing. Judgments and liens. You are required to inform the court if there are any judgments or liens against you. It's only judgments filed in court. It is not required that you list private debt like credit card debt or school loans or anything like that. It's only if someone has filed a judgment against you. Pending legal proceedings, lawsuits, whether you're suing someone or being sued. So if you're suing someone, you want them to know that you've changed your name so that they know how to get you your money. If you're being sued, the judge is going to want you to include, to notify them so that the plaintiff can find you and you can give them their money. You would just need to include this language in there. I'm a party to the following action, the caption name, when it was filed, the index number, what judge, what court, and you want to attach the summons and verified complaint, which if you are a part of a legal action, you will be familiar with. Again, shouldn't stop you from anything. The judge may ask you to notify the opposing party as a condition of getting your final orders. If you have a criminal history, you only need to report misdemeanors and felonies, and it only has to be convictions. So if you were charged with something and then it was dismissed, you do not need to include that. You also don't need to include violations. So red light cameras or anything like that, you don't need to include that. We're talking misdemeanor convictions, felony convictions only. You can attach a certificate of disposition, which you can get from the court where you were convicted. You don't need to attach a full criminal record. Bankruptcy, if you filed for bankruptcy, you can find the decision on PACER, which is the federal database for bankruptcy for a lot of federal court documents. And you can attach the discharge of debt, which is the judge signed an order saying this debt is discharged. If it's a super old one, you can include a summary if you can't get the actual discharge. Family relations. You do not need consent from a spouse, and you don't need consent. If you are an adult, you don't need consent from a parent. Some judges, for whatever reason, ask for this, and it's not really appropriate or legal. It's definitely not required by the statute. So if really for any of these things, if you get a judge asking you for additional information when you have provided them everything that's required by the statute, red flag that, because it's not appropriate. You do need to declare child support and spousal support. So if you owe that, you need to let the court know so that they can look into confirming whether you're up to date and making sure that your other parent knows, of the name change and can keep track of you, because there are databases for child support. For children under 18, someone over 18 needs to serve as petitioner, but it does not need to be the parent. It can be, quote unquote, the next friend. So if you are 16 and you have a sibling who's 18 and your parents are super unsupportive, that 18-year-old can petition on your behalf. They would just, it would be, John Smith, in the application of the matter of John Smith for leave to change the minor's name from old name to new name. The same as if it was a parent. You do need to notify the parents with a certified mail, with proof of certified mail, which can get a little hairy if you live with them and they're not on board. But a lot of parents, sometimes they're just like, do whatever you want. I'm not helping you. And so in a situation like that, fine, notify them, and the court will maybe set up a hearing, give them a chance to stomp their feet. But ultimately, the standard is that the name change needs to advance, the interests of the infant or the minor will be substantially promoted by the change, which for a trans person, pretty clear that's the case. So, they can get upset about it in court, but really it's very clear when you file a name change for a trans minor that, I include a whole paragraph explaining why the minor is seeking a name change, including things like, um, they go by this in school. We're not able to travel as a family because they can't get a passport that matches their gender identity. And then it causes problems at the airport. It subjects them to undue harassment and discrimination. And they want to apply for college and take the SATs. They want to get a job and they can't get a job. All these things that we know going through this every day are an issue. um, the more you put in there, the more you're convincing the court that it's necessary. For an adult, you really don't need all of that information. Doesn't hurt to put it in there. But for a minor, especially because the standard is a little bit different, especially when you're dealing with a non-consenting parent, the more information you can put in there, the better. It is not standard to include letters from therapists and all that, but if it's going to be a big issue with a non-consenting parent, sometimes you want to include as much as you can. So if the child is in therapy or is receiving medical treatment for a transition, having that backup is sometimes helpful, depending on how kind of aggressive the non-consenting parent might get. If the minor is 14 or older, you do need to include a notarized consent affidavit from them. And you also need to include consent from the non-petitioning parent if possible. But like I said, only notice is required by statute. So if you're dealing with a situation where one parent is super supportive and happy to be the petitioner, but the other parent is not, then that might be a situation where you want to include more information. But you will ultimately need to show the court that you notified the other parent whether or not they consent. If they both consent, then you include the notarized affidavit of consent from the other parent in the original petition, and it avoids any complications. Or it should. You might end up with a decline to sign situation, but that's surmountable. Immigration. Everyone, whether they are documented or not, has access to the courts. So technically, a name change is available regardless of your status, but the judge may require notification to USCIS, Homeland Security, Immigration, and they're allowed to do that. So if you have someone who is either undocumented or in between, in the middle of immigration proceedings, you just want to give them a heads up that there is a chance that the court will require them to notify Homeland Security. And they can weigh personally whether it's worth doing this now, or maybe they want to wait until everything wraps up, or something else. I would definitely recommend talking to an immigration attorney if you are working with someone who is, if you are undocumented or have some sort of other status besides citizenship. If you are seeking asylum based on trans status, proof of your name change may actually be helpful, because like I said, you have to publish in the newspaper. It can be helpful to put into your asylum application, look, this has been in the newspaper here. I can't go back home. It's public knowledge now, and it's a risk to me if I end up having to go back there and this is now out in the world. You can technically change your name through the immigration process in some circumstances, which helps you avoid having to update documents. Immigration documents are some of the most expensive to update. So if it's possible, like I said, talk to an immigration attorney, and they should be able to explain how that process works. Consult your immigration attorney before filing. Can't say it enough. Publication is a legal notice or classified ad. It's very tiny in the back of the newspaper. If you're in New York City, you want to do this in the Irish Echo. You can ask the judge specifically for that because it is the cheapest and it's not very widely circulated. It is kind of, everyone jokes that the only thing keeping the Irish Echo running is name change publications. If you're outside New York City, the judge will designate a newspaper. They'll tell you where you need to publish. It'll be a local one. I did it in the Roslyn News. There are like different heralds depending on where you live, or other small newspapers. And I have a bunch of information about contacts there and how the process works for each newspaper. But really, they give you the phone number and the name. You call, they'll tell you what to send in. You really just email them a copy of the part of the order that tells you, what they need to publish. And it's going to be your old name, new name, date of birth, place of birth, and address. So it's a lot of information. I've had luck just changing it to city and state of my address and not the full street address. But you need to remember to do that in the order so that whatever the judge signs says what you want it to say. Um, in Nassau County, I have filed over 100 name changes, and I have only had 2 have publication waived, and that's been for minors, even though I ask almost every time. The opposite of that is Suffolk County, where if you file in Central Islip, they will waive publication for a trans name change petitioner, even if you don't ask. I would still ask, but really, it's kind of a crapshoot. Depends on the judge. So even if you ask in Nassau County, it's not a guarantee. If you feel super strongly about it, it is appealable, but it will prolong the process. When I did my own name change, I did it before I kind of knew how to do all these things. And I found out after I filed that I could have asked for a publication waiver. And I called the court and I spoke to a guy who I now work very closely with. And I said, can I just submit an affidavit asking for this publication waiver? He said, well, you can start over and pay another $210 and include it, or you can acknowledge that no one is reading the Roslyn News and go on about your life. And for someone who does not have a privacy concern really, or a safety concern really, it wasn't a big deal for me to just let it be published, and that was that. If you have a privacy concern or a safety concern, the court is really concerned about the safety stuff. If there's been a personal issue that you've had, a safety risk, someone is harassing you, stalking you, any of that, and there's a risk that you are concerned about, it may be worth fighting. It's a personal decision. But the language that I have that I put in the petition goes through a lot of stuff. It's got case law in there. It says there is a generalized risk of violence against trans people, whether or not I've had a personal situation. It's risky for me to have all this targeting information out there. And I have no idea who has it. You can, like I said, ask for the publication waiver. Waiver of publication and sealing of the records are tied together under the statute. So if publication is waived, then your record actually gets sealed. And if someone walks into the clerk's office and says, can I see this file? If your file is sealed, they'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no file here. If the file is not sealed, someone could walk in and say, can I have this index number, or this is the petitioner's name, or this is the new name. And technically, it is public record. So it's possible you'd have to have some information to get it. I don't think, unless there's something really actually going on, I don't think anyone's like going to the clerk's office and looking for anyone's information, but it's out there. And it's also on the e-court system, which is the electronic filing system. I really went over all this. It's appealable. If it is denied, like sometimes they'll grant the name change, disregard your publication waiver request, and say that you need to publish. So if you have a real problem with that, you can appeal that specifically. Some people just say, whatever, I just want to get this done. When you file in New York City, the purchasing an index number is $65 because you're filing in civil court, which is a different court system. Outside New York City, so Nassau and Suffolk, it's $210, and you'll file in Supreme Court. There is no request for judicial intervention fee. So if you've ever filed another type of case, there's a $95 fee to ask a judge to get involved. Name changes do not have that fee. A fee waiver request, they call it proceeding as a poor person, which is not great language, but that's what it is because the court does stuff in old ways, and they don't change. So you want to show the court proof of income or lack thereof. So if you are a student, if you receive any sort of benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security benefits, disability, like anything that you can show the court that explains why you have insufficient income to pay this, or why you don't have the resources to cover the expenses or anything, you want to provide them with as much as possible. So that includes like a scan of or a photocopy of your Medicaid card or Social Security statement, anything like that. If you put the language into the order outside New York City, you can put language in that says that you want 5 free certified copies because you obtained a fee waiver. And I can give you that language as well. The clerk will give you 5 free copies. You still need to pay the publication fee because newspapers are private entities. So the clerk's office is kind of tied to the court system. So they'll listen if an order says waive this fee, which you would generally need to pay for certified copies. But a newspaper, they can't order the newspaper to not take money from you. So if you get the fee waiver, then the only fee that you would be responsible for really is the publication fee, which is anywhere from $35 in New York City up to about $75 elsewhere on Long Island. In New York City, you'll file at 111 Center Street in Manhattan, no matter what borough you live in. They have a name change part specifically, like a courtroom that only handles name changes. And they hear a lot of trans name changes. You will not be the only trans person in the room. You purchase an index number at the clerk's office and they'll schedule a hearing date. Hearing days and times are limited and it can be up to 4 to 6 weeks later. Right now, I should have prefaced this whole presentation by saying the courts are closed to non-emergency matters right now. So you cannot file a name change at this time in any court in New York State. Hopefully that will change soon. They are starting to open things up a little bit and open it to non-emergency matters, to currently pending matters. So things that are already filed. Like I'm in the middle of a name change for someone and I haven't been able to file their publication proof. So we're just kind of sitting and waiting. But hopefully on Monday, I will be able to file that because it's ongoing. And then hopefully in the next few weeks, they'll start taking other cases. But New York City, they'll send you a little postcard with your date on it. It'll be 4 to 6 weeks out. And the hearing procedures depend on the judge and their staff. So some judges will ask you a bunch of questions. Other judges will call you up and be like, so you're changing your name? Cool. And that's the hearing. So in New York City, there is actually a hearing. You do have to go back after you've filed. Outside New York City, you purchase an index number at the clerk's office for your county's Supreme Court. So in Nassau County, that is on Old Country Road in Mineola. In Suffolk, I will explain in a moment, but you want to file in Central Islip because they do things same day. And most don't require a hearing or appearance outside New York City. Some might, especially for more complicated cases, but some will take everything from you there and just file everything on their own and you know mail everything back to you. Others will ask you to bring it directly to the courthouse. Others will send you directly up to the judge. In Nassau County, they you can either give it to the clerk and they'll send it over to the court, or you can go across the street to the courthouse and give it to the law library and they give it to a judge and then mail everything back to you in a couple of weeks. And then in Suffolk County, if you file in Central Islip, you buy an index number at one window, you go to the next window, they tell you what the judge's name is. You go upstairs to the judge, hand it to their staff, they bring it to the back, or if the judge is on the bench, they bring it to the judge signs it, you go back downstairs. If your publication is waived, you're done. And you can just mail a request to Riverhead, which is where the main clerk's office is. And they will send you your certified copies in a week or so. So Nassau County, the whole process takes about 4 to 6 weeks from start to finish, from because they usually make you publish. So from filing everything to getting the judge to sign it, publication, and then delivering the publication proof back to the clerk and picking up certified copies. And then in Suffolk County, it's generally same day, and then you mail a request out for your certified copies and have those within about a week or so. No matter where you're filing, you should bring an original or certified copy of your birth certificate. If you don't have one, you can get one from vitalcheck.com with no C in check, VITALCHEK. And you also want to bring your photo ID. Bring any other original documents you reference in your petition. So if you had a bankruptcy or you have a divorce decree that sets out child support and stuff, if you, I don't know, any like original documents like Social Security notifications, if you're asking for a fee waiver, anything that you would include as an exhibit, you want to bring the original of, just in case the judge wants to see it. The clerk's office will be able to photocopy it, or the law library will be able to photocopy it. And basically that's enough proof for the court that they've seen the originals, and then they'll give you the originals back. Check with the law library or court help center in your county for local details. They'll be able to tell you kind of the ins and outs. I do have specific instructions for Nassau and Suffolk with super detailed notes, like sign in before you try to talk to anyone here, because they will be rude to you if you don't, and you'll have a much more pleasant experience if you just sign in first. So like super, super detailed. Once you've received your signed name change order, you need to publish and then return the proof of publication to the clerk's office when picking up your certified copies, or you can do it by mail. It takes a little longer by mail. If you had to notify creditors or parties to lawsuits or anyone else, you would do that the same way as you notified a non-consenting parent. You just use that green certified mail receipt and you bring that stamped receipt back to the clerk's office to show the clerk that you satisfied what the order requires you to do. In New York City, certified copies are $6 each. Outside New York City, they're generally $5 each. In Nassau and Suffolk, they are definitely $5 each. I would suggest getting 5 copies if the record is unsealed, 7 to 10 copies if it's sealed, because you need to send an original away for your passport and for your birth certificate. So having some extra copies around is good, especially if it's a little bit more difficult to unseal things later and get more copies. Don't remove the staples or any receipts, because that nullifies the certification. So document changes. Once you have your certified orders, all New York State and New York City documents and federal documents are changed administratively. So you're not going to go to court to change any actual documents. You're only going to change your legal name. You're going to change passport, Social Security, DMV, birth certificate, school records, bank records, all that stuff administratively. Some documents do require that doctor's letter. They ask for proof that you've had appropriate clinical treatment, which does not mean anything in particular. It can mean you came out to your doctor, as long as they're comfortable signing that letter. That's fine. I have templates, samples on my website. I would get 2 to 3 original ink signed copies, like I said, and any MD or DO can sign this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a transition related provider. So if you have a GP or like some other specialist that is aware that you are trans and knows that you have undergone appropriate clinical treatment, that's fine. It can be from that person. It can be from a therapist who is an MD or a DO, so a psychiatrist or other mental health provider that is an MD or a DO, but psychologists, not every agency will accept those. Social workers, not every agency will accept those. So just, it's easiest to just get one letter for everything, and not kind of have a hodgepodge. Changing everything in any order is fine, like I mentioned earlier, as long as you have that name change order and doctor's letter. And there's no monolithic database that knows who you are legally. So my documents are all over the place. I have an M and my new name on my driver's license, an X and my new name on my birth certificate. My passport still has F and my old name. My social security has F and my new name. And nobody puts those things together and says, well, who actually are you? They don't talk to each other. So the only time it's an issue is when you need to use multiple documents in conjunction with each other. Like if you need multiple forms of identity, like proof of identity. And then even then, if you have your court order and your doctor's letter, that's the same person. So they're able to tell that. You might have an awkward conversation, but whatever. That's a decision that you can make, about how comfortable you are having those conversations. Some people don't ever change their birth certificate. Some states actually don't allow you to change your birth certificate, and they're getting sued and they're going to lose, but it's possible that, you may not be able to change your birth certificate for whatever reason, or maybe you just don't want to. I know my mom was most upset when I opted to change my birth certificate, because that she thought was like the official, like, this is who you were when you were born. But now my birth certificate is the only thing I can get an X gender marker on. And so that is my only document that's actually accurate. X gender markers, some people want them, some people don't. They are available on New York City birth certificates. They are not available on any federal documents at this moment. That's in litigation currently. There's someone suing the State Department to get an X on their passport. A lot of other countries do have X's, and the international agency that regulates air travel allows for them. So the State Department doesn't really have a good argument for why they're not letting this happen. And I think they're going to lose. They are not available on Social Security. So if you were born in a place where or if you are born now and your parents decide they're going to give you an X gender marker on your birth certificate, and you're from a place where that's allowed, Social Security actually requires you to pick M or F when you apply for a Social Security number. So at this point, you can have an M or an F with Social Security and an X with other stuff, and that's fine. You can't get one on a driver's license right now. I'm about to talk about some of the advocacy around that. You can't get one on a New York State birth certificate right now. So no New York State documents, no federal documents, but New York City birth certificates, yes, and ID NYC or NYC IDs, which don't really do much, but they do allow you to get a form of ID that, if you're a New York City resident, that reflects your gender. So birth certificates, the changes are requested from the jurisdiction where the birth certificate was issued. So where you were born, regardless of where you currently live. The requirements differ by jurisdiction. So some states use the letter, but even if the state uses the letter, some say appropriate clinical treatment, some say proof of surgery, some will be happy enough with proof that you've had like outpatient surgery with like a hormone or blocker implant put in. Others want proof of genital surgery. Luckily, New York State just wants appropriate clinical treatment. So that's the simple one. Some states require a court order instead of a letter. So New York doesn't issue those orders, which I'll talk about in a second. So if you were born somewhere that does require a court order, you will need to get an attorney involved at this moment. And some jurisdictions, like I said, don't allow birth certificate changes at all. New York State and New York City issue separate birth certificates, but now both accept a notarized affidavit from the applicant. It's called self-attestation. So you don't need any medical treatment or medical proof or documentation at all. You just send the affidavit signed by you in front of a notary along with the application materials. Like I said before, you're going to change driver's license, non-driver ID, social security, passport, school stuff, immigration, bank, mortgage, deed, insurance. For social security, if you are assigned male at birth, you will need to register for the draft when you turn 18, regardless of what your gender marker with them is now or at that time. If you were assigned female at birth, you can either, when you turn 18, register for the draft if you've changed your gender marker, or you can get a status information letter. So that letter basically, when you apply for it, you have to explain to them that you're trans and that's why you are excused. But the letter itself does not say you're trans. It just says you're excused from the draft. So if you are going to apply to college, a state school, or apply for federal student loans, or try to get security clearance for a job through the federal government, or any number of things, they will look at your draft registration status. And it's simpler to just register and assume that you're not going to get drafted, or if you are drafted, you'll get excused because you're trans. At this time, I think that would be what happens. But if you don't want to register for the draft and you are assigned female at birth, you get this letter and then you submit it with any of those applications to explain to them why you are male with Social Security and not registered for the draft. I have more information on that on the website as well. So you've heard me talk about some advocacy we're doing. There's a bill called the Gender Recognition Act up in Albany that closes a bunch of loopholes and addresses a bunch of issues that people have with changing their documents in New York State. This bill removes the publication requirement from the name change statute for everyone because it's outdated and silly and it doesn't serve the purpose it used to serve, which was that if someone owed someone money, the newspaper, which was a thing that people actually read, would give them a heads up that they should be looking for this person's new name. Nobody reads it for that purpose now. It also codifies the ability for minors to change their New York State birth certificates. So until about 2 months ago, if you were under 18 and you had a New York State birth certificate, you could not change the gender marker on that. Now, because they got sued, the New York State Department of Health came to a settlement and allows for minors to change their birth certificates. And part of that settlement was also that self-attestation piece. It used to be that New York State birth certificates were the only time that a doctor's signature was not inherently notarized under New York law. So you would have to find a doctor who was willing to go out in their personal capacity and find a notary to sign this stuff in front of. I used to go sit at my endocrinologist's office after every appointment, and he would print out all the letters and I would notarize them for him. I've, in the middle of appointments, popped into other patients' rooms to notarize stuff for him, but that is no longer required. So I'm very excited about that. It also allows courts to issue the gender change orders that I mentioned for folks who were born in states that do require it, rather than having to find an attorney in one of those jurisdictions and pay for legal fees there and all that. This bill would tell judges, you are allowed to do this. It's different from our New York document changes because that state actually requires it. So this would give judges jurisdiction to do that. It also allows trans parents to change their name and the parental designation on their child's birth certificate. So my kids were born before I changed my name, and the State Department of Health won't let me change my name on their birth certificates. So when I registered them for school, I had to bring my court order and their birth certificate and out myself to the registrar, and it was a whole thing. And if the Department of Health just let me use my name change order, which was sufficient to change my own birth certificate and all of my other documents, then this would be a non-issue. But they want trans people to go out and get an additional court order, which judges will not grant because they say document changes are administrative in New York. Why are you coming to us? We can't tell the Department of Health to do this. And then, not every county, the judges it won't do this consistently everywhere. So some people may have access to it depending on how they petition and where they petition. Other people can't. So this bill would tell judges, would tell the Department of Health that they need to allow this change. It also makes self-attestation the standard for all New York State documents. So it gets rid of the doctor's letter requirement, and it establishes ex-gender markers for New York State issued documents. So right now you might have someone who was born in New York City, like myself, who has an X on their birth certificate. And if I went in to get my first driver's license with that X birth certificate, they would say, no, you just have to pick M or F. But if someone had an F on their birth certificate and wanted to change it to M, or had an M on their birth certificate and wanted to change it to F, then they would need a doctor's letter. So there's this discrepancy there that doesn't make sense. So this would allow for people who want an X gender marker to get X's on their state documents as well as their New York City documents. So here are a bunch of resources. This is a link to my website, which has all the templates available. TILDEF in the city provides pro bono name change assistance. They connect you with a pro bono attorney. The New York NYU Law School ID Documents Project, sometimes they'll connect you with a pro bono attorney or law student, and sometimes they can provide funding for fees and costs. National Center for Transgender Equality ID Document Center has state-by-state breakdown of what you need to change documents from every state, that hyperlinks to all the instructions and forms. And so this is especially helpful if you live in New York now, so you're going to get your name change here, but you were born in, say, Florida or something like that. You can go look up on the ID Document Center what the requirements are for your specific state that you were born in. And then, of course, Pride for Youth, which provides counseling, provides name change assistance, provides social programming. A lot of you probably know the drill with Pride for Youth. So that is everything. And I'm going to see if we're able to answer questions from inside the chat. I don't see any questions. So now is the time. If you've got questions, please ask them in the chat and I will stop sharing. And now you just see me. And if you have any questions that you're either not comfortable asking through the chat or on here, I am always available by email. My Pride for Youth email is carrowood@longislandcrisiscenter.org, or you can reach out to anyone else at Pride for Youth and they can connect you with me. And I hope this was useful for everyone. I still don't see any questions. So I'm going to end this, but I will be available in the chat for a bit. And I hope everyone enjoyed the expo and got something out of it. Good luck.